since I read this the first time. Could have been longer, could have been not as long, I don't quite remember, but it was the 1990s. And let me start off by saying I'm far less convinced and far less impressed than the first time around. But, oh, believe me, his books are worth reading, even if you don't agree with his conclusions that ignore spirituality or psychedelics or something like that. Although Eric von Däniken is far worse when it comes to that. So, and you know, he's gone over a lot of sources, and do they all agree? No, no. They mostly support each other about talking the same things. The myths of the Sumerians and, well, the Persians are really what we refer to as the same people nowadays, but the Akkadians and all these other people, they came first, they refer to the Bible, and within these myths you have things that have to do with... What do they have to do with? You know, the creation of man. Information about the stars and the precession of the equinox and all sorts of information like that. And some of this information is encoded quite accurately. But should we say that the information compiled in here, or the myths as a whole, literally represent, spacecraft and all that sort of stuff? No. I would not go in that respect. I would say that there is the spiritual encounter, and of course people make things up, people change the details, people mess up in transmitting the details, and the transmission of spiritual traditions has improved over time in humanity, or maybe some of the stuff was just not necessary from the past, and well, sometimes the method was very good, but there was a disaster, and the people that had learned it, or where it was written down. But Zecharia Sitchin reminds us that some of that stuff in the Bible is not translated literally, and it sounds off. Nephilim is a big example of that. And there are correlations that this becomes this, Enki becomes Marduk, and Marduk and Ea. It's like being a Latter-day Saint for all those years. Their idea of Lucifer was really Ea, and Enki was Satan, and, instead of Ashtaroth, you had Inanna, and... well, I think Lilith's kind of a branch off of the two, but in the Bible you have Lilith and Ashtaroth, which are considered separate. Yeah, you have the breakdown of the language. I would have brought this up had I started on number 47 as I thought, but there's an interesting glyph. It's called a Vulva Woman, which is an awesome name for a superhero, by the way, which kind of resembles this sort of pinkish, magenta sort of one right there. The variations of that glyph resemble that, and the name of that happens to mean something like that, which, again, I find very interesting. So, particularly when you're looking at the Bible and stuff like this, it may be important to understand, hey, where do these words come from? What are the similar myths that happened before that? And, I mean, you do have to explain one of these things. I mean, if Enlil, Enzu, and Ninurta are sort of like the Christian Trinity, okay, fine, that, people can say that's all invented or whatever, but how does there's a lot of accurate information. And by 12th planet, they mean they think there's a couple, beyond Earth. Tiamat was a planet, and Nibiru, and there's reason to think from astronomy that there are actually 2 other planets out there somewhere. And In another way of thinking, you see the myth of the Earth as the seventh planet. You know, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Earth. But there's reference to the. But I don't think there's evidence to support this every 3,600 years theory. I think that has more to do with the precession of the equinox when it's mixed in with other stories or other cycles and stuff like that. I mean, there could be a comet that comes through every that often. There could be a giant star that every 3,600 years it does its. I mean, a giant planet out there every 3,600 years it does its rotation, and it gets or twice that or something like that. It gets closer around that often, or who knows what those ancient myths have to say. And I would strongly recommend that you look in further to these stories, how they relate, and what information does science not refute, and what will it confirm in the future.